So, two religious men die at the same time and meet St. Peter at the pearly gates. And St. Peter says, "I'd like to get you guys in now, but our computers are down. So you'll have to go back to Earth for about a week, but you can't go back as humans. So what do you desire to be?" So the first man says, "I have always wanted to be an eagle soaring above the Rocky Mountains." "So be it," says St. Peter, and off flies the first man. So the second man mulls this over for a moment and asks, "St. Peter, will you be keeping track of us? That is, like knowing and seeing what we're doing?" St. Peter said, "No, I told you the computer's down, so there's no way that we can see you or keep track of what you're doing. This week is a freebie." "So in that case," says the second man, "I desire to be a stud." "So be it," says St. Peter, and the second man disappears. And so a week goes by, and the computer is fixed, and it's time for St. Peter to recall the two men. And so the Lord asked St. Peter, will you have trouble locating them?" And St. Peter said, "Well, the first one should be easy. He's somewhere over the Rocky Mountains flying with the eagles. But the second one could prove to be more difficult." "And why?" asked the Lord. "Because he's on a snow tire somewhere in Alaska." For those of you that are here with us for the first time, please forgive me. We just add a little bit of humor. Yeah, John told me that my chipmunk joke, was so bad, but his daughter has been telling everyone she knows, so I don't know what that means, but. So again, welcome, and here we are we're about complete with our 5-week focus on female metaphysical masters. And today is, I'm highlighting someone that you've probably heard of. If you've been in Unity, you've heard of Dr. H. Emily Cady. And so I wanted to share with you her words, and you might be most familiar, I'm going to show you the book here, Lessons in Truth. Now that is a classic course in Unity. It's one of our fundamental courses, but today I'm going to share with you some words from how I use truth. Now you see this book has been through the ringer. I've used it quite a bit, but I haven't used it recently, and I have to say that reconnecting to this has just been such a joy because the woman is an amazing woman. She is still, as her legacy continues. So let me tell you a little bit about H. Emily Cady's background, and then we're just going to dive on into her teachings. She was born in 1848 on a farm in Dryden, New York. Not much is really known about her personal life, but we do know she never married, and she started her work being a teacher in Dryden. And not knowing what inspired a shift in careers, Cady decided to become a homeopathic physician. And she was one of the first female doctors in New York. It is from this career path that she began to notice that people did not heal their illnesses from external remedies. She directed her patients to look inward to find the source of their health and well-being. Dr. Cady began to regard them as spiritual beings and noticed how healing occurred as they changed their thoughts and began to put their faith in their true divine nature. As she became more and more open and committed to learn New Thought teachings, she became a student of Emily Curtis Hopkins, who was a teacher of Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. She began to write. One of the first articles Dr. Cady wrote was called "Finding the Christ Within Ourselves." This article was read by Unity co-founder Myrtle Fillmore, and because it so clearly expressed the principles of spiritual healing from a place of inner knowing and clarity, Myrtle and Charles reached out to Dr. Cady and asked her to write for Unity Publications. Her first official Unity article appeared in Unity magazine and was called "Neither Do I Condemn Thee." So many readers responded positively to it that she was asked to write a course on the principles of divine healing. This course consisted of several books that ended up being what we now know as the book published in 1903 as Lessons in Truth. This book has since been translated into 11 languages, and over 1.5 million copies have been sold. Dr. Emily Cady never visited Unity Village. She only met the Fillmores because they came to visit her in New York. She didn't go to the village because she tended to play down her personality self and didn't want to get caught up in the external accolades and zeal about her work. She was grounded and did her best to stay poised and centered in her truth. And they say she was really tall. So again, How I Use Truth is a compilation of many different articles that she wrote. And what I noticed specifically as I reread this book was how often she used scripture and she used Bible stories to support her teaching. So you're going to be hearing some of that today. So that article that so many people loved, Finding the Christ Within Ourselves, is the foundational article, the first one in this book. How perfect. Because she launches immediately in teaching us, what is the Christ? What is it? And she teaches that it's our essence, our divinity and wholeness, the perfect pattern of wholeness that we are. And knowing and claiming that essence, that divinity, is foundational of all healing. And she says that we find the Christ at the center of our being. And I always like to just explain that. We find the Christ at the center of our being. Finding, it means there's not a Christ thing inside of us. Okay, it's not like a raisin in a bun, as Eric Butterworth describes, because we find it in our awareness. Do you see? Because the Christ is what we are. It is the perfect pattern of wholeness that we are. It is our essence. So it's not a thing that we look inside to find. It is our essence. And she said, knowing that truth and claiming that truth, the I am nature that we are, is how we live truth. It's living truth. Living truth. And what we are is the same thing as what Jesus was. And this is a quote that she shares about that very thing. It was the Christ within that made Jesus what he was. And our power now to help ourselves and to help others lies in our comprehending this truth. For it is a truth, whether we realize it or not, that this same Christ that lived in Jesus lives within us. It is us. So whether we realize it or not, whether we claim it or not, whether we believe it or not, doesn't change the reality that it's what we are. And so, of course, she used a scripture to back that up. Jesus quoted a saying in Matthew chapter 11, "Come unto me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He wasn't talking about come to me, the person. He was talking about come to an awareness and a realization that you are the Christ. Come up and come into an awareness and an understanding of oneness, that you are infinite life, that you are infinite wholeness, that perfect pattern of wholeness. Come to me, come to that awareness, and you will have rest, and you will have peace. And so I don't know about you, but when I heard this scripture in my Baptist days, I didn't get that interpretation of that. The more, the Christian interpretation of that. And what I loved is that she made a distinction, and without any judgment, and please hear, I don't have judgment of that. But she made a distinction between the Christian life and the Christ life. So the Christian life is when, yes, we follow the teachings of Jesus. However, what she felt was that's also when we look out external to ourselves and we look for a God that may or may not answer our prayers, that may or may not support us in our healing. Whereas the Christ life is when we call forth into our awareness the truth of what we are, and we live from that knowing and that claiming. But first, we have to awaken to that truth. So here's a Bible story that she shared that I thought was so perfect about awakening to the Christ that we are. And it's found in Matthew 8 and Mark 4. All right, so here's the story. It was evening, and Jesus had been teaching the crowds. And so the disciples dismissed the crowds, and Jesus gets in a boat to go out into the sea. It said to go to the other side. And the disciples get in the boat with them. And so Jesus falls asleep in the stern of the boat. And the boat becomes tossed by these tempestuous waves. And their waves are about to overcome and engulf the boat. And the disciples woke up Jesus saying, "Teacher, don't you care that we're perishing? Save us." So Jesus got up and rebuked the wind by saying, "Silence, be still." And the wind died down and was perfectly still. And then he turned and asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And the men were amazed and asked each other, "Who is this that even the wind and sea obey him?" So, okay, here we are. So here was Jesus in the boat, and the ocean was raging. But Jesus' presence alone didn't stop the waves, did they? Did it? He was asleep. It was only after he was awakened and his power called forth that the waves became peaceful and calm. See, folks, this is an example of what it is with our Christ nature. We are the Christ no matter what. That presence is always present because it's what we are. However, we get to awaken because our lives can be just like that boat, right? Tossed and turned by anxiety and fear and distrust and a belief in separation. And so what this story models for us is that we get to awaken the Christ that we are in order for us to fully experience the fullness of life's abundance, fully experience the fullness of all that we are. We must awaken and claim and express our Christ nature. And she talks about how important trust is. We get to trust. According to Emily Cady, getting still inside and putting our faith in what is true is the meaning of trust. Being still and knowing, even when the world around us is tempestuous, even when it feels so overwhelming out here. She gives us 2 steps to access our Christ awareness. She says, okay, step 1 is don't give your power to what's happening out here, ever. Step 2, look inside. Claim an awareness of the Christ that you are. Call it forth. Get still and know and trust. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? It's like, okay, let me check that box. It's not simple. It is a simple truth. Actually, it's just not an easy truth sometimes, is it, on our journey? But what she teaches, and she saw it in her healing practice, is that when her patients shifted their attention from what was happening in their physical bodies, what was happening in their external lives, as they shifted their focus and power to the Christ of their being, everything started to shift. there was an opening. There was an opening for that Christ essence, that perfect pattern of wholeness to begin expressing as every cell of their being, as their abundance, as their joy, as their love, as their peace. So this is the very simple teaching. It's a very profound teaching of Emily Cady. And there's more. I could talk more. She is very clear, though, that the foundation of living truth is claiming our divine nature. And folks, and I know that is our spiritual journey because many of us grew up not knowing that or believing that. And now is our time to start claiming it and living it, to be still and know and trust. So, let's take this on together, okay, this week. So I just invite you, whatever's going on in your life, wherever you're feeling maybe your boat is being tossed and turned by some tempestuous waves, I just invite you to step one, notice where you're given your power. There's a lot of focus going out here. Just take a moment, be still, turn your attention inward, and just begin to focus on the truth of what you are. And just notice. Just notice. So, let's affirm together. I live from the truth I know and experience peace, wholeness, love, and joy. And so it is.